Hello everybody, welcome back to the Chess Legacies. My name is Grandmaster Illia and I'll be your host for the day. We shall finish what we started last week, I believe. The great Ukrainian chess players of the past. I have managed to only show you guys 2 out of 4 examples of some of my favorite Ukrainian chess players. And without further ado, let's jump right into it, knowing how long I usually take to discuss a single example. So the following game is between 2, some may say very prominent chess players of that time, Grandmaster Anand Viswanathan, who everybody most likely knows as a former world champion. This game was played back in 2005, 2006? 1989, I wasn't even close, so this game is from way back. But even then, Viswanathan Anand was already rated over 2,500. We're talking over 30 years ago. You know, he was one of the top players at the time already, having faced Ukrainian Grandmaster Adrian Mikhalchishin. I hope I'm not butchering his name. And so yeah, let's jump straight into it. The opening phase did not. I wouldn't anticipate anything crazy out of this opening. Just your good old Ruy Lopez. Nothing new here. So bishop a4, knight f6. These days, white can sometimes respond with d3, overprotecting the pawn on e4, and in some lines, white actually postpones castling, as far as I know, trying to use this route for their knight, and sometimes the knight even ends up on e3 in some cases. But you know, the opening theory has since evolved drastically. Back in those days, I think this was the golden standard, just castle. Black taking on e4 would lead into positions of its own kind. There's some rook e1s, and it's just, you know, a different type of game. Mikhalchishin chooses the more common b5, forcing the white's widespread bishop back to b3. And after a simple developing move, bishop b7, this is the first, arguably this is the first key moment of the game, where Viswanathan Anand goes for a rather rare line these days, goes ahead and plays this move c3. c3 is white's attempt to fight for the center immediately. As we all can see, the move c3 leaves the e4 pawn hanging, which Adrian Mikhalchishin promptly takes. So this is white's attempt to make the game a bit more dynamic, sacrificing the pawn on e4, not necessarily trying to win it back immediately, but rather trying to keep black preoccupied getting their pieces out after having misplaced their knight. You know, arguably, the knight should be seen as a good piece on e4 since it's the center. You know, it's a center square. But the matter of fact is that this knight can easily be kicked out and is going to have to start running around. So taking on e4 involves positional sacrifices for black. Yet, Adrian Mikhalchishin manages to solve all of the issues and more. So d4 comes in. This is yet another bait. Black shouldn't be falling into it. Taking feels really, really bad for black. Really bad news. As after rook e1, knight is pinned. And now if, let's say, d5, white can already go ahead and just simply capture on d4, winning one of the missing pawns back, but still maintaining a lot of different threats. Chances are that black is unable to handle all of these threats all at once, so it's better to take it easy and not take on d4. That's exactly what Adrian Mikhalchishin does. So this is an interesting dynamic. Yeah, whenever we manage to win material, not only are we ahead material-wise, but we also get an additional perk, if you will. That perk is sacrificing the material back to win our positional advantage back. Yeah, that's what Adrian does here. He goes ahead and plays knight to a5, basically saying that, okay, well, you can have your pawn back, but in return, I'm going to win one of your best pieces, right? The bishop on b3 is white's main hitting force against the pawn on f7. So this trade does go through. Anand takes on e5, knight takes b3, and queen takes. Average dasher, which sacrifice are we talking about, sir? At what point? Over here, is this the moment? Let me know. I will come back to it. So once again, going back here, now the position is slowly turning into a mild, maneuvering-like style, as after queen f6, which by the way is a pretty special move all in itself. Utilizing the queen as a defensive piece in Ruy Lopez, I don't really, it doesn't really occur to me which lines in Ruy Lopez would have this idea. Maybe some lines where black plays queen f6 early on, and then the g8 knight ends up going to e7. I've seen some of those lines before, but in no other place do I remember black queen coming out like this. So queen f6 looks like, in my analysis, I'm saying that at this point Anand should have played the move knight. Oh, sorry. No. If knight d6 was played, my apologies, not queen f6, but if knight d6 was played, it was pretty much similar idea, just to defend the f7. The game could have continued this way, with knight d3 opening up the e file, bishop e7, knight c5, knight is getting repositioned to c5, which is a semi-outpost, if you will. So long as black's knight remains on d6, c5 is secure. Black would castle, and something like this might have occurred with an unclear game. I'm not a big specialist in Ruy Lopez, but to me this seems like a pretty reasonable attempt for white, as black has clearly overextended the queenside pawns. At that time, playing a6 b5 made perfect sense, as black was trying to get their light squared bishop into the game as quickly as possible. Now, as the light squared bishop is gone, chances are that white can just start undermining these pawns, and black might have to do something about that. But luckily for Adrian, this didn't get to that, because he found queen f6. Competitive muffin driver, hello. Muffin diver, my apologies. Hello there. Awonder. Yeah, Awonder. Awonder has never appeared on these streams except for when he would be giving an interview, a post-game analysis interviews. Yeah, I would like to see Awonder doing some kind of lecture style thing online. That would be very entertaining.
Boros will be talking about Awonder's match after this.
Awonder's match?
Yes, against Salem Saleh.
Oh right, yeah. So right after I'm done, I should mention this. Okay, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Okay, so queen f6. Anand goes f3. So f3 is a weird-looking move. This is basically Anand's claim that he doesn't want to trade pieces here necessarily. The obvious decision would be to just go ahead and play knight to d2, and then after simple knight takes, bishop e7, looks like black is going to be developing just in the nick of time, also thanks to some tactical opportunities. So castling may feel like a blunder, but taking on d7 loses to a simple double attack of queen c6. So luckily for black, development phase is now over. Black has a bishop pair. White does have a bunch of play of his own. Once again, it's still going to be revolving around queenside pawn attacks. So a4 here, and I have a sample line to demonstrate what could have happened after bishop d6, a takes b5, bishop takes e5, and this already feels very, very drawish. We're entering at the endgame territory with bishops of the opposite color. Rook e5, d6, rook g5, a takes b5, and it is clear that black is likely the one making a draw. Actually, no. Why is that? I take it back. I don't think that's the case, because white can't take on b5. There are back rank problems, so white is not winning a pawn, and if white is not winning a pawn, then then what is there for black to be afraid of? I guess this position is just even, and would most definitely end with a draw. But Anand had none of that. He was here to fight, and unfortunately, whenever you're facing an opponent who is about your level or maybe slightly weaker or slightly stronger, if you are very keen on taking the fight to them, chances are that you will have to take risks, right? Because it's very, very difficult to win a game of chess if you don't give your opponent a chance to screw up, right? You have a couple of tools to do that, but in the end of the day, you need to give your opponent a rope to hang themselves. Excuse me for a dark comparison, but f3 is such an attempt where black now needs to pull their pieces back. And look at that, Adrian Mikhalchishin comes up with a very nice knight maneuver. So he does not place his knight onto d6. Can somebody tell me what would be a long-term problem with placing black's knight onto d6? It happened in some of the previous lines, but right now I don't think this would be a good idea. Why not? Anybody? Just a simple logical explanation would do. A long term, yeah. So I feel like long term we might need the d6 square for our pawn to go to, because this knight is quite a nuisance. Yeah, not just because it's on a pseudo outpost, as we can't really kick it out, right? Both of those squares are taken by some of our other by our pieces, but also because it's hard to cast. Remember, there is this annoying knight d7 fork whenever we do decide to castle. So we would have to spend extra moves just to make sure our king can get out of the center. So here, after bishop e7, we can't castle because of knight takes d7. So we need to spend extra time making the castle possible, and that might cost us, actually. Let's say white's going to go maybe even a4, for example, just as a demonstration of what can go wrong. a4, we need to defend d7 somehow, so I guess rook d8 would probably do it. And now after a takes, rook to a7. Now white's rook is getting quite annoying on the 7th rank, so our pieces are getting misplaced, right? Whenever we are developing, one of the main goals is to find synergy and balance between our pieces, right? We can't have some of our pieces being on each other's way. Yeah, we need to make sure everybody can get out, everybody can have a common goal. But here, our pieces are not having a common goal. We're cramped up for space, and just inconvenient. So going back, knight to c5 is a very, very nice attempt to solve those long-term problems by having the knight go to e6 instead. In a couple of moves. So over here, this is where kind of the fun stuff begins. In a couple of moves, we will reach the position that I've used multiple times to play practice games against my students. And the reason for that is because the position is so unusual. So after a4, as I've mentioned previously, a4 is one of white's main plans, right? Just blowing up the black's queenside pawn structure, trying to get in as quickly as possible. And over here, on the contrary to what I just said, that we may possibly need d6 for the pawn, right? All these things, Adrian Mikhalchishin had very, very specific idea in mind, and this idea only works out because of the way his knight is positioned right now. Sometimes when your pieces are in the right places at the right time, things just work out. This is the thing about harmony in chess. If you're making sound opening choices in terms of development, things will all fall into place, and that's not an exception in this case. So bishop to d6, a very important attacking idea, taking the e5 knight. I want to say taking the knight hostage, but the knight can really move away any time at once. The thing is that white doesn't really want to move the knight because of its great positioning, right? The e5 is arguably the best square for the knight as of this moment. Once again, makes black's castling more difficult. Protects white's king side against the dark squared bishop, just to name a few things going well for the knight. So white, understandably so, is trying his best to keep the knight on e5, or if black does decide to take and trade it away, now white can go ahead and perform one of the more common pawn rushes on the king side. At this point of time, castling short would be a death sentence for black. They're just going to get run over, right? f5, next move is f6. There's really nothing black can do right now. The king side is getting exposed, and not only that, but black is also lacking pieces on the king side to help save the king. So this, once again, this is the position that I've been using to play practice games against my students because of its unique nature. On the surface, it may seem that black is in trouble, and it would be correct, right? If not for one striking idea. Whenever I look at any middle game position and I see my king is still in the center on a semi-open file, no less, I'm like, yeah, okay, well, something had got seriously wrong for black. But chess is a cool game. I can't help it. I keep going back and making an example from the movie Matrix, or from the movie trilogy Matrix. Not sure how many of you have seen Matrix. Probably most people have seen it. It's an iconic movie, and whenever the main character is learning how the system is working, he is told that, well, these are rules of the system, but if you know a couple of tricks, some of these rules can be broken. And chess works the same way. You can break some rules if you know a couple of tricks, and the tricks are such that certain things are more important depending on the situation. So as of right now, white's control over the center is more important than black's king safety. Red pill and blue pill, yes. Which pill am I feeding you guys right now? What do you think? Which one is it? Actually, I honestly don't remember which one is a good one. Or was there a good one? There was an anti-hero on the team, yeah, who wanted the other pill because he didn't want to be hit with reality. Anyway, the central control, yeah, the black and white pill. Okay. The central control is more important for white than king safety is for black. So over here, Adrian Mikhalchishin goes ahead. No, not that. Goes ahead and plays c5, undermining one of the most important pawns in white's position, the d4 pawn. This move is so strong that white actually had no other way but to pretty much let the capture happen. If you think about the possibilities, how can white defend the d4? Well, there's two ways. Bishop to e3, which leads to material losses for white. Simply just bishop takes e5, pawn takes and queen takes. Extra pawn, black's next move is short castle, life is good. And secondary option is rook to d1. Why is this one not so good? Can somebody please tell me? This is the tactical test for everyone in here. A puzzle, if you will. Black to play and get a big advantage. Anybody? Chat? Live audience? Chesteroid says that there is a sneaky third option, which is d5. Well, d5 drops the knight. Right over here, if you go back, d5 is not really an option. I'm not going to take here, although I probably could. I would just take here, and after all these trades, you are down a pawn once again. So I'm afraid this doesn't work out. Let's go back again. c5, rook d1. Black to play and get a big advantage. Foo's chess, yes, that's correct. But you see, if you do that, black will have a big advantage. It's not necessarily about winning material, right? It's more so about getting stuff that you want. And in this case, material is not necessarily the thing that black wants the most. What black wants the most is control, I believe. Controlling the flow of the game is sometimes worth a lot more than having an extra pawn or a two sometimes. Okay, so I'm seeing some discussion online. I'm not quite following you guys. Can they take what?
Can you take
C takes d4, that's correct. That's move number one, yes. And what if, okay, so here white has to make a choice very carefully. What if white takes back?
Can you take it again?
This is the answer I was looking for, right? So that's step number one. We have identified a tactic. We are winning a pawn in this tactic, right? It seems a little bit scary at first because, well, our king is on e8 still, but do not fret. Bishop pair is taking care of everything. My favorite bishop pair. I can't have enough of the bishop pair. If white takes a very easy endgame, right? We have an extra pawn, we have a bishop pair. If white takes on e5, we may not even have to castle anymore because it's the endgame. The king belongs in the center. If white doesn't take, well, actually, can white not take? I think white can't even not. My brain just froze for a little bit. It's double negative. How do I say that? White cannot. You see what I'm trying to say? I mean, it's not. Is it grammatically correct to say that white is unable not to take? Well, it sounds so weird.
Yeah, no,
white cannot take.
I can't not do it.
Cannot not. Yeah, not do it. Okay, all right. Well,
White
it's
is compelled to take it.
white is compelled not to take. Oh, wait, that's d2. Well, this would also result in an endgame of some sort. And once again, endgames are going to be in black's favor. This one is a little bit trickier. I agree with you because our king is weirdly placed on d8. It probably wants to be elsewhere, but white is lacking pieces to annoy it. Yeah. Plus, white's queenside pieces are underdeveloped as of right now. So we have time to pull our pieces together and give the king some cover. Also, I feel like we might not even need to take on e2. Maybe we just castle. Oh, but that drops the pawn back, yeah? Oh, wait a second. Okay, but yeah, I mean, we're going to be up a pawn, but we're winning. Our extra pawn is doubled. Yeah, this is not. I feel like we should just take. We should just take the queen and go into the endgame. But yeah, this is the tactic I was looking for. Foo's chess in the chat pointed out that after we take on d4, there is this knight to g4 intermezzo, which kicks black's queen out, meaning that we are not going to be winning any material. But this is kind of what I've been talking about. This position is now fully controlled by black. Why am I saying that? Can somebody please fill me in? Why do I believe that black has full control here?
Seems like black has
Better pieces, right? Pieces are looking in the right direction. White has, it's not an, it's an isolated pawn, but so does black. But white's isolated pawn is right. It's getting attacked, right? We have access to the outpost on d5. White has issues getting pieces to appropriate squares because of the way our pieces are placed. So this feels like we're playing as white. This feels like we've done a good job. We've deterred our opponent from developing, and we are in control. Oh, Fus Chess was suggesting it instead of rook. Oh, okay. So I misunderstood, but it kind of works out. Yeah, knight g4 would be the way for white to save material here, although the position would still be bad. But knight g4 here was suggested by Fus Chess, avoiding the attack and maybe making sure that white can end up taking on c5. Okay, yeah, this would work. I feel like, once again, it makes black's job easier, but I'm gonna pause myself and say that knight g4, like this idea, just going into a position like this, black managed to finish developing, but white has some things going well for them, right? The d pawn is isolated, although that's about it. I'm pretty sure that with precise play, black should be able to maybe even trade it away or get some kind of other play, maybe on the queen side this way. So this still feels like the game is about even. I'm going to cheat a little bit and check out the engine. The engine actually gives black an overwhelming advantage, which is crazy. I guess I'm not seeing some tactics, some knight f4 stuff. Knight f4, rook e, yeah, there's actually a lot of attacking moves. I thought white can just go knight d2, which immediately loses to knight f4, queen f2, rook e, what did I do? Nothing, I'm good. Rook e8, and if takes, we have rook e2, and white is toast. It seemed to me that like black should be okay. I guess I just didn't pay enough attention to how strong black's attack is about to get. I figured the f4 square control is important, but I just didn't see the follow-up with the rook coming in onto the e file. I should have guessed. Okay, so yeah, I feel like this would be actually a better line for white than what happened in the game. Not gonna lie, this game is a little tricky. I feel like there must be some aggressive play. Aggressive play, yeah, well, we've seen plenty of aggressive play from both sides. It's not gonna get overly crazy, but this is the breaking moment. After c5, Anand makes the decision to drop his d4 pawn by taking on b5, and this is just not a good trade in general. Like, he's taking the side pawn, he's dropping the central pawn. His position begins to crumble. You guys will see how in a moment. So knight is in trouble. Once again, knight g4 was a possibility, but Anand chose knight c4, which ran into bishop c5. Now, black is also engaging in a tempo play, because after bishop c5, white needs to do something about the d3 discovery check and a double attack. So it's either king h1 hiding the king, or just taking on d4 and then playing king h1, which is precisely what happened. And black just castles. So actually, Average Dasher just made a great point. White's pawn chains have crashed, right? The chains are broken now, and who does that favor? When there are not that many pawn chains in a position, who does that favor? Which side? There's something special about this dynamic. What pieces benefit from this the most? From pawns being gone? The bishops, yeah. So we have bishop. I'm sorry. I just can't help it. I see the bishop pair. I see an open position, and my eyes light up. Okay. So, right. I mean, to be honest, I felt like this is move 18. I felt like this game is going to be over by move 25, the most. At most, you'll see what I mean. But Adrian let Anand play for a tiny bit longer. I guess he was just a nice guy. But I'll show you what I mean. So over here, if white tries anything aggressive, there's actually a bunch of tactics that white is going to fall into. So if, let's say, white tries like knight a5, maybe hitting this bishop, black can just take on b5 because of the pin. And if white tries it with knight d6, same thing. Just take on b5 because the rook is under attack. If white takes, we will take back with a bishop. White will take back, and we just have a very, very nice, cozy, open position for a bishop pair, where we do have a passer that's going to be running all the way up. To be frank, I believe that this is one of the best things Anand could have done at this moment. But no, you see, the main reason that I think Anand lost this game was that he might have failed to turn the switch in his mind. What does that mean? Well, before every game, people have some kind of plan, right, for the game. Right? People who are tournament players, they take their chess very seriously. These are two of the best players of that time playing each other. And they had some kind of plan, and Anand was clearly motivated to win this game no matter what. But sometimes things don't work out the way we've planned. This was probably a good time to start, doing damage control. But Anand was unstoppable. He still believes that he can get stuff done, even though he is at a clear disadvantage. He has pieces that are misplaced. He has weaker king side. He has weird pawn on b6 that he considered his strengths. He thinks that this pawn is going to be going all the way down, but it's not. It's actually going to be captured with the next couple of moves. So over here, Adrian Mikhalchishin finds a very nice bishop to c6, activating his light squared bishop. As soon as bishop gets to b5, the b6 pawn is dead. So kind of what happened, but just in a different move order. Bishop e3, d5, hitting the knight. Now, taking on d4 loses on the spot because of knight takes d4, and white ends up losing a piece. So only move, knight c to a3. Anywhere else the knight goes, besides maybe d6, but actually if it goes to d6, it's trapped, yeah? We just go here and knight is trapped. So can't go there, cannot go to either d2 or a5 because of simple bishop b5, skewering the queen and the rook, winning black some material. So it has to go to a slightly obnoxious square on a3, because what in the world is it doing there? It can't even move out unless it wants to keep going backwards. I mean, Anand should have felt that it's getting hot in here, yeah. Adrian decides to cash out. He says, "Well, I can just take the pawn. I will soon take the other pawn too. So let me cash out, get 2 extra pawns, play a phenomenally good position." Needless to say, this is easily winning. White does not have anything to show for their missing 2 pawns, and it just becomes a matter of time. I'm sure Anand realized that it's probably a bit too late, but with some arguably imprecise play, the game was concluded eventually, but probably could have been ended quicker, and yet white never really had a chance afterwards. So this is one of my favorite games from Grandmaster Adrian Mikhalchishin, as he opposed to the old-time legend Grandmaster Anand Viswanathan. And there's a lot of psychology that goes into chess. I'm sure many of you have paid a visit to a friend of mine, Grandmaster Denes Boros, who teaches the psychology in chess lesson series. And I believe those are also streamed online, so you guys are definitely familiar with this fact. But it is something that costs games. Yeah, this is something that loses people games, and you always need to be objective. You need to stay objective. I see mistakes such as unprecedented fear. My students sometimes tell me that, oh, I did something because I was afraid that something, 10 moves later may happen and I'll lose. My opponent can magically teleport their pieces near my king, and suddenly I'm losing, and I'm like, yeah, okay, well, this you have to stay objective. This is a fair game, you get to make a move, your opponent gets to make a move. Things don't just happen because they can. Things happen because they are allowed to happen. If your opponent has a plan and you allow the plan to exist, to be executed, it's going to happen. You're going to lose, but you are there for a reason. You're there to stop it. So think about these things and try to keep your mental in check, because it can sometimes cost you a point. So game number 1. Now moving on to game number 2, and as always, I just took forever. Hello. Thanks for joining, Average Dasher. See you later. Fuschas says, when you're the higher rated player with white no less, it's hard to admit you're worse and it's time to grovel. Yeah, I mean, you can't always be winning. Sometimes you have to accept the fact that people may have a good game. Anybody, actually, nowadays, anybody can have a really good game. I've been playing, many tournaments over the past couple of years, and people of all kinds of levels would have amazing games. It's just how it works. People get better constantly. The average level of play rises. And you just have to accept it as a fact. It is what it is. Sometimes you are, well, what was it saying? Sometimes you're the windshield, sometimes you're the bug. I mean, not quite. I'm not sure if it's quite applicable in chess, but it's you get the gist. Okay. Last but not the least, Grandmaster Oleg Romanishin and his amazing attacking game against none other than Tigran Vartanovich Petrosian. I have used Tigran Petrosian's games to study positional play, as he is known as the king of positional play. So, if he is paper, Oleg Romanishin is the scissors in this matchup, and I'll show you guys what I mean. It starts off pretty timid, as most of these games. You never see it coming. Yeah. Here we have actually b6. It looks like a Bogo Indian setup. Yeah, this is what I'm commenting here. Bogo Indian setup versus English. The bishop ends up on b7. Oftentimes, these Bogo Indian setups do end up transposing the Queen's Gambit declined, as Black ends up playing d5. Or sometimes Black never plays d5 and instead plays c5. These moves are made to help Black fight for the center. So this is why Oleg Romanishin wastes no time and just goes e4 and goes for it. But not because he has blood in his eyes and he sees nothing better. He has a plan. Bishop b7, and here comes a novelty. Bishop to d3. If some of you guys have played some of the Alapin variations against Sicilian defense, you might know this maneuver. So in Alapin variation, I'm just going to backtrack all the way back here, just show you what I mean. So this is Alapin. And sometimes in these Alapin structures, something like this will happen, and white will put their bishop onto c2. The reason for this is because white wants to have better control over the e4 to play d4 easier. Because if you don't do this, if black plays knight f6, if you keep your bishop on e2 and black plays knight f6, now there's a problem. You can, by the way, there's an opening trap. I'm making an example, but it's not really, or is it applicable here? This is an opening trap, right? White plays d4, drops the pawn, kicks the knight out, and then there is this double attack against the black king and the knight on e4. But whenever this opening trap doesn't work, you have to defend the e4 somehow, and usually white resorts to doing it with d3, which significantly slows down the the fight for the center, because white wants to end up playing d4, but then white ends up making another bunch of moves just to make sure the e4 pawn is safe, and only then d4 happens. So it just takes a lot longer than it has to. And this is a similar idea that's being used by Oleg Romanishin in this game. He wants to have full control over the e4 to make sure he can easily play d4 later. Actually, he plays d4 immediately, which then transposes into a well-known pawn structure. Can somebody tell me what this pawn structure is? Usually, black ends up playing a6. Maroczy bind, where white may or may not play f3, because now they don't have to. In Maroczy bind, white plays f3. Guess why? To give e4 pawn additional support. It actually is not needed here, which makes this position unique. From black side, this is called a hedgehog setup. Yeah, Extra Cheese Project got it right. Maroczy bind or hedgehog if you're playing this as black. So game proceeded with logical moves. Now here comes another surprise. So in normal Maroczy bind, the bishop would almost always exclusively end up on e3. Couple of reasons for that. One, whenever black goes a6, the b6 pawn gets weakened, so white sometimes may decide to apply some pressure on it, and the bishop really helps. And the other thing is that if black ever manages to play d5, then in normal Maroczy bind, your pawn is on f3. If black goes d5, the king gets exposed, so we better have some defender, right, for that diagonal. But here, Oleg Romanishin is on phase. He goes ahead and fianqueros his bishop onto b2. And you guys can probably already see where this is going. This is how you know. This is how you know what is to come. But looks like Tigran Petrosian was fully confident about his position's sturdiness, because hedgehog is known as a very sturdy defensive setup. It is very hard to break. But things changed, yeah? Oleg Romanishin didn't do the normal Maroczy bind. He did the sophisticated Maroczy bind, where he is already fully prepared to launch the kingside attack. So, once again, unfazed, Tigran Petrosian plays a6, king h1 comes in, queen c7, and now it is time. f4. f4 is a pretty much a multi-purpose move. It opens up the f3 square for the rook lift. It takes away the e5. It sometimes gives white an option of playing e5 himself. I would say this option is going to be mostly unavailable for this specific case, because white simply doesn't need it, but it exists. Rook a d8, and here Oleg Romanishin makes a nice supporting move, rook to c1. I'm actually not sure if this move was needed at all. I think white was fully ready to just go ahead and do the thing on the king side, but rook c1 is a little bit of a trap. Whenever black places their knight onto c6, if white has the rook on c1, knight to d5 trick becomes available. Let me make a dummy move to demonstrate what I mean. Actually, in this case, it's not available because the bishop is in the way, but let's make another dummy move, and this would be the one, right? Knight to d5. Now, this is a big fork. Black doesn't really have to take, but if they don't, things will go pretty bad for them. So they end up taking on d5, white takes back. And it's pretty much a simple tactic where white wins some material using the misplaced queen and a knight from black's side. So after rook c1, it's almost automatic that black ends up responding queen b8, getting the queen out of the white rook's x-ray. Now Romanishin goes rook f3, g6, and this is the position where the unstoppable attack is coming in. Knight to d5. I would say that these moves are no surprise in our day and age, because people who play Sicilian as their main opening, myself included, have probably witnessed this idea being used couple of dozen of times. I myself have used this idea before. It's solely a positional sacrifice. It does not necessarily yield anything immediate. All it does is it opens up the position for white and it closes down the position for black. Why? Because after the capture, e takes d5, e takes d5. Now black's light squared bishop is completely boxed in by the white's pawn chain. So even though we are playing down a piece here as white, we have just opened up an e-file and we closed and we boxed in black's queen side. So purely a positional sacrifice, but boy oh boy is it effective. How do I feel about black placing the knight on c6? Not very good. Yeah, good point, Foos Chess. So the Foos Chess pointed out that because the issue with placing the knight on c6 is well known nowadays, the knight would almost always end up going to d7. But even then, similar ideas would apply, aka the knight to d5 ideas would still work out even here, because it does exactly the same thing, closes out the bishop, opens up the position for our light squared bishop, opens up the e-file. So this idea would still stand. Okay, so after e takes d5, knight takes d4, queen takes d4, in all fairness, having equipped cloud engines as my helper, I have managed to find the only defense for black. Black can survive in this position. Black can survive, just barely, but black can survive. But it's not easy. It involves a lot of precision, which, by the way, people don't have. People have a tendency of acting upon their emotions during chess games whenever they feel like something is off. And definitely, Tigran Petrosian is feeling the heat right now. He's been attacked, and he's not used to it. He's used to being safe and fighting back whenever his opponent overextends. But this is not. He doesn't have time to play this way. He has to react immediately. He manages to find one of the best moves available, which is just simple rook d to e8, getting ready to place the rook onto the open file, and also freeing up the d8 square for the queen in case the knight on f6 needs additional help. Romanishin goes f5, and now bishop d8. So I guess the idea was to open up the rook all along. Where do you guys think the rook is going to go on the e-file? What is the best square for the rook going to be? e2. e2 is interesting, but all this does is, I guess in some cases you may end up sacrificing the rook for the light squared bishop if white's light squared bishop is too much to handle. So in that regard, I agree rook e2 could be useful, but I feel like it's not really the light squared bishop that black is most concerned about here. I feel like it's these guys, right? Because these guys are delivering the final blow if anything happens to the knight. So in this regard, yes, so Evan 3345 got it. I believe the rook is actually trying to come here, even if it means that it's going to be captured. Once again, black is up material right now, so giving back an exchange may significantly simplify black's defense. So queen h4 manages to find another good move, rook e5, as stated previously, queen to h6, and now this is where the final mistake happened. Once again, whenever you're getting attacked like this, oftentimes both sides do not have any margin for error. If you make a mistake, either attacking or defending, chances are that everything falls apart. If white is inefficient with their attack, they're going to lose because they sacrifice pieces. If black is inefficient with their defense, what is there to say? They get mated, yeah? So everyone is on the ropes. And Petrosian is the first to fall off the cliff. Queen c7 seems like a pretty good move. It gets ready for the queen to come closer towards the king. And if white does decide to take on g6 after black takes back with an f-pawn, the queen is going to be directly protecting the king side. So all in all, this seems like a good move. By the way, I want to point out that the drawing move here is knight to g4. It was very, very important for black to kick the white's queen out of h6. And once that's done, black can go right back. Boring. But maybe, just maybe, Petrosian believed that he can even win this game. Unfortunately for him, that's not going to happen, as after rook to g3, white now has immense pressure against g6. As you guys can see, the g6 sacrifice is brewing. We can take on g6 twice, including the bishop, then rook is going to follow, and the king is going to be dead. I'm pretty sure that's what happened, although Romanishin took on e5 first, and then he took on g6. And the rest was pretty simple, as black's position is falling apart. In terms of material, if white doesn't succeed in checkmating, they already recovered full material and more. Luckily, there's going to be more extra stuff that white can capture, especially this knight on g4, which loses balance, and eventually black falls to a nice little trick over here. I'm inviting everybody to give it a shot. White to play and win. Show me how the game has concluded. Hello, Cheesy Gazebo. Queen takes a4. Yeah, queen takes a4, exactly. Simple removing of defender. I think it's the final move. Black resigned. But I guess if black ends up takes, and if bishop g5, we have about a million different winning ideas. What do you guys think would be the simplest?
I think maybe rook to d1.
Yes, rook to d1. Yeah, I do believe this is the simplest, because if we drop the d7, it's just we're gonna have two rooks against the queen, and that's too little. If we play d8, we do have an overwhelming advantage, but it's only an exchange up, yeah? So rook d1 allows us to win a lot more than just an exchange. We're threatening to take, we're threatening d8 queen, and the rest is history. So I guess this will conclude my Ukrainian Chess Legends Part 2 lecture. I appreciate everybody coming in, people in the chat, the live audience. I hope you guys enjoyed the games. And starting from next week, we're going to be exploring, you know, a bit of an older generation of players, like way older. I had some requests for Wilhelm Steinitz. I'm not even sure if I can find any games. I probably can. Who am I kidding? But be ready. And on that, yeah, I'll be excusing myself. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.
Hello everyone, I'm International Chess Grandmaster Yasser Seirawan, and I'm in the newly renovated St. Louis Chess Club here in St. Louis, Missouri, the chess capital of the United States. The Chess Club hosts premier events featuring the greatest chess players in the world. Some of the highlights from 2025 include Clutch Chess The Legends, the 2025 U.S. Chess Championships, and Clutch Chess Champions Showdown. But our true mission is to teach chess to students in the community and give children in the area the experience of competing in a real tournament setting. In 2025 alone, we served roughly 10,000 students throughout the St. Louis region, and we hosted a dozen scholastic tournaments, including the annual St. Louis Public Schools tournament that featured 200 students. Through our Scholastics Outreach Initiative, we brought the educational benefits of chess to more than 100,000 students, both in school and after school, with our own developed curriculum across the greater St. Louis area. Through robust after-school programs, tournaments, and educational outreach, we're not just teaching chess, we're fostering a love for learning, building confidence, and empowering the next generation of leaders, both on and off the board. Thanks to the generous support of the chess community, we are able to bring chess to thousands of students, building champions in the classroom and the community. But the St. Louis Chess Club is only half of the chess campus. Across the street, at the World Chess Hall of Fame and galleries, visitors from around the globe can discover the cultural and artistic significance of chess. In 2025, we've hosted a number of exciting exhibits, including the animal-themed Paws and Pawns, Chessvariant's Transforming Tradition, which teaches different ways to play the game. Charles Hauska, Master of Play, a career retrospective of a locally based artist. And Reading Between the Lines, Chess and Literature, an exploration of chess and its relation to the written word. The World Chess Hall of Fame is the only institution of its kind in the world, providing visitors with a unique opportunity to use chess as a platform for learning, exploring, and seeing their world in entirely new ways. In addition to our exhibitions, visitors can also enjoy curated tours, arts and crafts workshops, kids programming, and of course, the World Chess Hall of Fame Music Series, which has grown into one of our most popular events, hosting world-class contemporary and classical artists. 2025 was an exciting year of growth and outreach for both sides of the chess campus, and we look forward to serving the community in 2026.
If you're new to chess or have just started learning the game, Beginner's Night at the St. Louis Chess Club is right for you. Mondays from 5:30 to 8:30, you can learn the basics of the game in a friendly, judgment-free zone from experienced instructors, and get valuable practice going head-to-head with other players who are also starting their chess journeys. It's never too late to learn the game, and now is the perfect time to start. Join us for Beginner's Night at the St. Louis Chess Club.
Are you a lady looking to hone your chess skills? Did you play as a girl and want to get back into it? Did you ever want to know more about chess but were afraid to ask? Ladies' Night is the perfect opportunity for you to get in the game. It's a special class held every Wednesday night by women for women. Plus, St. Louis Chess Club members can attend for free. Whatever your age or skill level, you're welcome at Ladies' Night.
On September 18th, the World Chess Hall of Fame is going to host its newest exhibit, Reading Between the Lines, Chess and Literature. This exhibition includes fun artworks and artifacts like rare books and beautiful illustrations related to stories that include chess themes. When you visit, you'll get to see how authors from different time periods and across the world have incorporated chess into their storytelling, from Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass to Walter Tevis's The Queen's Gambit. There's going to be a lot of really wonderful artifacts for you to see. We hope to see you at the exhibition opening on September 18th, and you can learn more about this event at worldchesshof.org.
Never been as heated, as fierce, most elite chess tournaments in the world.
nothing too important. Hello and welcome everyone. This is Breaking Moves. So we're going to talk about a match that popped out of nowhere. If anyone can guess what's happening, well, there's no shame of not knowing, because it even surprised me. So it's a match in, I believe, in Sharjah, and that match is between Liang, Awonder, the American Grandmaster. He crossed 2700 a year ago, I believe, and he's playing a match against the very, very strong player, Saleh. And he's actually famed for his very aggressive style of play. Now, talking about all these breaking moves, I do have to mention, as I mentioned before in a previous class, that we definitely have to remember that we have a special guest on February 28th, Kyla Zhao, who is famed for writing a book, May the Best Player Win. She's going to do a bit of a lecture and a talk with Irene Sukandar, and everyone is welcome to join that. I believe it's going to be here on the chess campus. She's going to sign her book over actually at the Hall of Fame, so the other side. So in any case, let's get into it. Let's look at this game. Do I know about the top seed of the St. Louis Masters? I do not know, but if you are not familiar with the St. Louis Masters, it's going to be a big qualifying event for the candidates, and it's an event where most of the top 100 will play. So most likely you're going to see top prodigies and faces that you usually don't see in America. So, and as far as I know, they will play here. In fact, up there, they're going to play there, and you will be able to visit. Don't give hints. It's frowned upon, and you'll be kicked out. It's a that one I promise. All right, so let's start with this game. Saleh plays d4. He plays more of the closed systems. Everyone else is obviously favoring e4, and that's kind of like a Fischer era favorite. But Salem plays more of these closed systems. d5, c4, e6. And Awonder likes playing this very strategical, we even call it the orthodox systems. And he's sort of inviting Saleh to go knight c3, and then black can respond with knight f6, even c5. That can even transpose to d Tarash. But Saleh is not interested in that. And that's actually kind of a little bit different from like Sicilians, if you'd be wondering, well, what's the difference? In Sicilians, you mostly have to go for open positions and the most demanding openings. You'll see that in the next game. And in closed systems, because nothing is really decided yet, you can sort of shuffle your cards a bit more than usual. So you get the chance to maybe trick your opponent into a different system that they're not familiar with. So here he's actually not forced to go knight c3, which I would still consider objectively the most demanding and probably the best move to play, but goes knight f3. Knight f3 is a completely fine and normal move. There ain't nothing wrong with that, just not objectively the best, which is kind of a funny way to put it, because As you'll see, what matters most is if you're comfortable with the position or not how good the engine thinks it is. And even if we think about it, the engine often would say it's like 0.2 difference of a pawn. So it's very little. But anyways, let's go into it. Knight c3, and then I wonder if you guys can guess what Awonder chose here. There are many, many moves. I wonder which one you'd choose. The pin, yeah, you can do the pin, although we don't call it quite that. Does anyone know what is the pin? Well, yeah, but does anyone know the name? Because this has... It's called the Rogozin. It's one of the more topical ways of playing these positions. It's very fine, and in fact, as we already just stated, is very popular. So you could go bishop b4, but you know, in chess, oftentimes you can get greedy. What would seem like the greediest move that black can possibly? Take the pawn, yes. So d takes c4. This is actually called the Vienna variation. Now, as you may know, it can transpose back to the Rogozin if both sides feel like it. c5, and this goes on and on. Very interesting positions arise, but it's not what they chose. Then e4, and here Awonder stuck with the pawn with b5. b5 is a strange looking move, but it has a point. If white would just capture on b5, then there is knight takes e4, and white sort of lost a center pawn for a side pawn, which usually favors the side who didn't have the middle pawn right there, and it's usually roughly balanced. So the most critical move is for Saleh is what he did, push the pawn with e5, knight d5, knight takes b5, knight b6, and at first blink, does any of you like this position for black? Raise your hand if you hate it. Just from first view. Now, I don't blame you, Ben. It looks ugly, right? You got the doubled pawns. This rook is a little bit exposed. There's no immediate way of taking advantage of that, but it can be an issue. But it turns out, even though, you know, it looks like the ugliest Swiss cheese I've seen, there's one big advantage that it gives black. This bishop is kind of locked in. It doesn't feel like it, but the bishop doesn't have, A, it can't capture because it's obviously protected. B, the best spot for your bishop is taken, so the bishop can only move to e2. And in fact, what black is claiming that even if you take this guy, now if you go g3, I will oppose your bishop that goes to g2. I'm not saying that necessarily g3 is bad. It does feel a little slow though. But in any case, black takes away a couple of key squares, and there's this juicy d5 square for black. And even if white manages to win the pawn after the trade, black will have very good play on this diagonal. But let's see what happens. So g3 definitely didn't happen. Bishop e2 does. Knight c6, castles, bishop e7. Just preparing castling. So if you look at this position, if that c pawn would be conspicuously missing, this would be a lot like a queen's gambit. Queen's gambit accepted, and a very typical position at that, with black, even in that opening, often giving up the c4 pawn in exchange for the control of the d5 square. Okay, so I talked about the advantages of black's position, but there is one issue for black. If I ask you which side the black king would be most vulnerable, which side would it be? King side, queen side? Where would the black king be most vulnerable? King side, why? Ah, you said queen side. Sorry, I misheard you.
I mean, black or white does have a lot of pieces pointing towards the king side.
Mm-hmm.
Move over at a
Mm-hmm.
much faster rate than black.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the queen side, there's a lot of damages, but you have a lot of pieces there. So, and honestly, I'm a fan of like human way of describing positions, because if I say, oh, it's plus 0.9, you don't quite necessarily know what I mean by that. It doesn't describe a position. But if you castle on the queen side, it feels edgy and a little bit wild, right? And you could kind of understand what I mean by it, that the position gets really complicated. And why would that be a better description? Because you make one mistake and you lose. And that kind of gives you a better guidance than me just giving a number. Because if I say, okay, you're guaranteed to win and then you lose, you'd be rightfully upset, right? So, yeah, you could go queenside. It is somewhat double-edged, at least, to put it mildly. Now, black decides that is a wonder to castle short. So Saleh comes up with this very peculiar little idea of queen d2. And he guesses where Her Majesty is headed. G3. First, of course, you're going to go to f4. Yeah, f4. Yeah, f4 or g4. And because Awonder already moved the bishop to e7, then the g7 pawn becomes a target, right? So, and because there is no immediate clash in the center, and white's pawn is over-defended multiple times, white has enough time to actually move his queen over to the other side. Now, of course, you can't stop me because I take the pawn for free. So you will have to let me do that. Now, even in these positions, you can choose to castle short or castle long. Castling long is very sharp, so Awonder chooses the safer move. Rook d1. And I like these little small moves. What's nice about Rook d1? Well, you're just making sure everything's protected and you're involving all of your pieces. Now, of course, if Queen f4, you feel you need to rush with this idea, that would also make sense. But he feels that Rook d1 is fine enough. King h8. King h8 is sort of getting ready for these kind of things. So if, let's say, queen f4, rook b8, queen g3 or g4, white would be setting up this idea of bishop h6, this trick. Of course, you would be pinned. You can't take the bishop. And then potentially you will have to weaken your king side. And then you'll have to go king h8. So when Awonder goes king h8 now, he's circumventing all this and making sure that he doesn't have to bother with that. Queen f4, knight b4. And knight b4 is sort of like a multi-purpose move because it kind of hints at some tricks, but also is eyeing the crucial square on d5. h6 anticipating queen f4 would have been your choice. You could try to go for h6 g5, but then you don't answer to the question where you're going to castle to. Yes, you may stop my queen moves, but I'm not sure where your king will find safety. So knight b4, queen g4, rook b8. Kind of all what we've expected to see. And I honestly don't find these moves too controversial because you're just putting your rook on open files. Now, believe it or not, there are a lot of players, even at the top, who just don't make these rook moves because they just think it's a waste of time. But they can be so useful that it makes sense to do it anyways. Like if you think of Karpov, Karpov would make these moves 90% of the time. 9 out of 10 times. So here's the big question that I want to ask you. Now, how should we continue as white? Because we kind of left the opening phase. We're immediately in the middle game. And this is the moment you'll have to choose a game plan. So, if you look at this position, are you scared of anything of what your opponent can do? You're playing white for now. Is there anything that scares you? Well, be careful, because my bishop and queen might take your knight. A4, knight A4. Okay. No, that's fine. Yeah, knight A4, but you're actually not threatening anything because my bishop is there covering that pawn. Not to mention that the C4 pawn is hanging. Yeah, knight c2 is also there. Although you can still move the rook, right? So nothing big, really. Anytime they either try to come at us, then they drop the pawn on c4. Or if knight c2, we just move the rook away, right? So we can kind of confirm that there's not much of a big threat from black. Therefore, you can just start doing whatever plan you want. Now, Chestory is saying h4, and h4 is very interesting. You could potentially even start pushing the pawn, or even controlling the g5 square, not even telling what, or telegraphing, or of which piece you want to put there. But you can also look from a defensive perspective. We talked about, oh, okay, so this pawn is defended so far, but it might become an issue. So you could even consider rook b1, right? Just over-defending. And that's actually a beloved way of playing at the highest level, making sure there are no weaknesses. Now he goes knight c3 first, because he decides that he doesn't want that knight be undefended. Also takes away that square. And this one is tricky. I wouldn't describe it as necessarily a defensive move, because you're also controlling a key square. And that's very important in chess. This knight sort of is out of purpose, doesn't have anything important that it's doing there. So bishop b7, knight g5. Now you could still go rook b1, which would be completely fine. He does it later. Yeah, that's a good point, Swish. The pawn was undefended. It also is defending the a2 pawn. Goes knight g5. Now, a little bit of a description of Saleh. Saleh is a well-known attacking genius. He loves attacking chess. And whenever he gets the chance, he goes after the king. Knight g5 kind of is in his ballpark. If he gets the chance, he's going to do it. So should we get scared? This is your chance to show me your defensive skills. Do you want to take that pony? No, why not? Yeah, so your defensive potential is limited. Yeah. So, and your bishop is one of those key defenders. If you trade it, you will be lacking it later. F6 never looks interesting. F6 here is really bad, because we not only lose the queen, we might even get checkmated. But h6 was actually played by Awonder, and h6 is a very nice little move. If you do nothing, white might actually position himself for the perfect attack and perfect storm. So h6 is a nice move, because even though you have this feeling that those pawns might become a target, it's much harder to get to than it looks on the surface. Knight h3, definitely hinting at this knight maneuver, but it takes a lot of time. And that's actually sort of the issue with these plans. They are really strong, but by the time you get there, counterplay might just happen. Queen e8, moving the queen away, hinting at knight a4. Knight f4, rook d8, rook b1. Now, again, notice knight h5, because Awonder played king h8 earlier, he has this idea of moving the rook to g8. So even if your opponent would try, or Saleh try, all these sacrifices, the rook will actually substitute the pawn and the pawn structure deficiencies. This is actually a very, very passive way of defending, but it's highly effective in this structure. Now, there's one more thing that I did not mention, even though I wanted to. The reason black can get into deep trouble because the f6 square is controlled by white. Normally, a knight on f6 would stop all kinds of counterplay. But because of the e5 pawn, that's impossible to get a knight there. Therefore, the attack actually starts going down, and it's harder to defend because of that. So it goes rook b1, rook d7, b3, knight c2. He doesn't want to take because even though it feels like in a dream world the rook would go over there and there'll be a rook lift, it's definitely something that black doesn't want to face. Because even here, if I go back to this idea, black is just barely not overwhelmed. So if black would face another piece in the attack, it'd be game over. And that's actually one of those things that you should always consider in a position. Always compare how many pieces are defending and how many are attacking. If the attackers outnumber the defenders, just by pure math, the attack is likely to succeed. Here, it's a queen and knight versus king and rook. King is a defensive piece. It can defend itself. Surprise, surprise. And if the rook would lift over to the other side, it'd be over. For that reason, Awonder is not keen on helping Saleh. And if takes, then there's knight takes d4. And a lot of things about chess is tactics and timing. So if white goes knight h5, it might seem that you double attack, yet knight takes e2 is a check, and therefore is good for black. So it takes with the bishop, knight takes d4, knight h5, knight f5. There are multiple ways of defending, and suddenly the tides are turning because this knight got really good on f5. It's actually difficult to get rid of, and this rook is highly unlikely to move around the board like that. Bishop f1, rook takes, knight takes, queen c6. Okay, so I would say that black actually is slowly but surely taking over. My question to you, though, what should black be looking for if black is trying to take the advantage? What should be your strategy? Is trade good for you? Are you supposed to attack? You definitely do, although Saleh is kind of safe-ish. Counterattack. Now, one of the biggest and toughest thing about chess, we can throw around words of, I'm going to counterattack you, I'm going to take your piece. But if you don't have like an immediate idea of how would you do it, it actually makes little to no sense. Now, there's a roundabout way of looking at it, though. What are the best pieces for white? The queen, right? So oftentimes you can say, okay, I have a plan, I'm going to do this, that, and that's how I'm going to move forward. Or Yeah, queen c2 is very concrete. It's a pretty good move. An idea, yes. But if our opponent has a good piece, what are you supposed to do as a naughty, naughty opponent? Ferdinand knows it. If they have a good piece, trade it. Because believe it or not, you're not supposed to become your friend of your opponent. You want to undermine their chess. Because otherwise, how are you going to win? So queen g4 is pretty good, and it's still kind of annoying. So Saleh goes knight e3, stops, sadly, our idea of queen c2, which was in the air, definitely. And also, we're threatening some ideas after the trade of knights. It'd be checkmate, to be exact. Queen e4, Awonder is not hesitating, and the trade is practically forced. And after the queen of trades, even though there are a couple of pawn islands, but notice one thing. This knight on h5 was justified when you were attacking and you're trying to mate. Now it actually does nothing. Also, these bishops are restricting these pieces. This rook is almost trapped. Not to mention the fact that the e5 pawn is a target. So knight takes f5, bishop f5, bishop e3. So, is there anything left that black could improve? Yeah, this rook definitely is not needed in defense no more. We could try to improve the knight. So again, never forget the key ideas of chess. What is a key thing to look for? What are the key squares we're always trying to control? The center, of course. So in fact, knight d5 would make a ton of sense, and it did happen, because even if they take here, sometimes we think in linear terms. So what humans do, and in fact computers do, because we designed them. So when we like, oh, I take the pawn, if I attack the bishop moves back to d4. But, believe it or not, you don't have to be that linear. Go ahead. You could go c5. I might actually kick you in that case. But you can also just chase me away first. And then wherever I go, then you can go and take the pawn. So you can move order me. And that's actually what humans often miss. Everyone's looking, oh, I take, you take me. We go back and forth, and then it works out magically. But if you're actually reverse the order of moves, it doesn't work as beautifully. So goes bishop d4 immediately, because that's safer. Bishop a3. And again, even though black has weak pawns, white's pieces are all over the place. Knight g3, bishop c2, rook e1, c5, bishop e3. And this is actually a tough thing to learn, but it's very important, because what Saleh does here is instructive. A lot of the times you have options to choose from, and in many cases these top grandmasters, they don't always calculate everything, they go by intuition. So the reason he doesn't put the bishop on a1 because he feels that bishop would be completely mummified over there. If you do this, I do take you, takes, I do think I have knight b4. And the thing is, if you go bishop a1, this bishop will never, ever get to a good spot ever again, and knight b4 might even win the pawn too. So you're just actually making the position harder for yourself. So bishop e3 is like, okay, I'm losing the pair of bishops, but at least I'm not down a piece. You know, you didn't lose the piece, but it didn't lose its function. So knight e3, rook e3. Alrighty. So, question, what can we do here? What can we try to improve for black now? Yeah, you can just improve the rook. And exactly what Awonder did. Now that's actually one of the interesting things about chess, is that, of course, you want to look for immediate wins, but in an ending, improving your pieces should take priority, instead of trying to win on the spot, which is very difficult in endings because there's just so many moves that you will have to make. Rook e1, bishop g6, and I'm not sure about bishop g6 necessarily, but I see also nothing wrong with it. Maybe what he could have considered if, let's say, bishop b4, then there's rook c1, and white is sort of winning a move on this, a tempi. It's not a waste of move in the sense that if he goes bishop b4, then rook c1 doesn't win time. So h4, rook d2, probably that's the other idea, just getting the rook in there. h5, bishop c4. Again, a sign of a typical Salem Saleh play. He says, please take my pawn, please, please do. Because if you do, then what happens? Rook d1, right? You just get the rook on the open file, and because this king is on an awkward spot, white actually gets some chances. Now, let's be fair. Black is not in big danger, but at least white is fighting for something. Because at this moment, white is kind of boxed in and you can't do anything. So a5. So first plan of Saleh to break free failed. What could be another way for white to try to muddy waters? And actually, that's kind of an interesting thing that you don't always see, because these good players rarely get into bad positions. But now you can see him in a bad position. Objectively, Awonder is doing much better. But they don't give up. They still look for ways to make it more difficult for the opponent. Good try, knight e4. And that's kind of the thing, like, and if knight f1, that makes sense. I'm not sure if I would like my knight on f1 though. Knight e4, that's like a better spot. And again, always try to gravitate towards these key squares. The closer you are, doesn't matter which color, to the center squares, the better it is. So like knight f1, yes, you chase the rook, but you again distance yourself from the key squares. I don't know what you're saying.
Sorry,
Rook e2? Yeah. Yeah, you could try to trade the rooks. Rook e2, knight e4. Yeah, rook e2 makes sense too. What would be a source of counterplay for white? And by the way, that's no criticism for either rook e2 or knight e4. You're sort of looking for ideas. So always try to make sense of your own moves. And I know that sounds like a very funny thing to say, but you sort of want to justify the move you made. So if you played bishop c4, they played a5, well, wonder why you played bishop c4 in the first place. Why is the bishop there? What could be a reason? But you're not even, I wouldn't even say you're prepping against e6, but you're sort of trying to zero on f7, because once you get rid of the e6 pawn, f4, f5. Yeah, so I'm not claiming f4, f5 is necessarily perfect, but in a beautiful world or in an ideal scenario, you want to think of these things. It goes knight e4, but f4, f5 definitely is something you can consider because that's a source of counterplay. It goes knight e4. Of course, this would be amazing for white because even if you lose the pawn, it's opposite colored bishops, so the chance of this ending in a draw is really, really high. So of course, Awonder doesn't want to trade it, but it does allow Saleh to get a knight on d6. King g8, rook d1, and this is again that typical case. You can only have one good thing going on. Either you have a knight on d6, or you have a rook on an open file. You can't have both, which is sort of an issue for white. So bishop c2, rook f1. Not the happiest move ever. Rook b2. Okay, so rook b2 is played here. My question is if we could play it a little bit safer for Awonder. Rook b2, I believe, was a slight bit of an inaccuracy. How could black play it a little bit safer and go from there? Now black could try to over-defend these pawns and go bishop b4 and then slowly go after the b pawn. Just making sure they're safe. Saleh gets a chance. Now he goes f4, takes f5. And what's kind of annoying for Awonder is that white, even though objectively close to losing, there's counterplay, right? You can feel it. White's pieces are firing away. Even here, Awonder should have gone bishop b4 and then tried to push the pawn. The reason I'm so for bishop b4, because it over-defends your pawns, and it's sort of a mirage. It feels like the pawn is a little bit weak, but it's not so weak actually, because you can't come closer to it. So it goes a4, but now there are millions of tricks on the other side. So if bishop b4, white can actually take here, check, and suddenly you are getting mated. So rook h8 mate, and g6 would just give billions of pawns for white, and it's very, very dangerous, even downright losing. There's too many pawns, the king is too weak. And why is this happening? Because in this case, I'm actually able to lock you out. Even if you go rook a1, I'm not forced to push the a pawn. So even though on the surface it feels your a pawn is defended, it's actually loose. So one of the best ways of top players of winning these one positions is to guard them. Guard them, don't give them counter chances. And a4 sort of just ran into this tactical trick of rook a1, and now Awonder is not dominating as much. In fact, objectively, it's closer to a draw. Still not a draw, but white is definitely having a better time than he had before. Rook a3. He probably was banking on this. And of course, white is in no way or shape or form trying to win this position. But black is sort of, I mean, in other words, his chances are diminishing. That's all I'm trying to say. Okay, so if you're defending with white, what would be the ideal formation? What type of setup would you want to have? So you want to bring the king up there. Okay. Yeah, you could use the knight. And the knights are the perfect blockaders, right? Now, yeah, it can never be kicked. You do consider, and in fact, g4 is something that white did, to over-defend the pawn. So the reason you may not want to trade, because now you are controlling the g6 square. Once you trade, that g6 break actually becomes a better move. So it goes g4, king f2, king e3, knight c4. And believe it or not, these are the cases when the defensive side kind of eases up, because you have a perfect blockade, very little things that you have to be concerned with, and that's when you sort of give up for your opponent. And that's a tricky situation because that's when you can find yourself in trouble. So bishop a1, king d7, check, back, bishop d4. And Awonder is doing a fabulous little trick, and it's something you can do in your own game too. If you're ahead but it's not quite winning anymore, just lure them into the comfort zone. Just make them feel that no, there's no danger. Just shuffle pieces around, and then suddenly something's going to happen. Bishop c3, nothing's really been changing much. Check, knight d6. Move the bishop behind it, but it makes no difference. Bishop a5, bishop d8. This is important because here there's like suddenly, once you're too far away, white actually can get some winning chances. There's a lot of games you can win if your opponent doesn't pay attention, thinking, oh, I'm winning, or I can't lose this at all. There's always a trick. Chess should be renamed, there's always a trick, the game. And that would be justified. Chess, too peaceful a name. Bishop a5, just making sure there are no trickies. King c7, check. And here actually white could have played knight d6, aiming for that same trick with this f6 idea, but just tries to play it safe. And that's why there will be some moment where Awonder gets a chance. Knight d6, king b3, but no longer is this such a big deal because the pawn is running down. Bishop d8, knight c4, bishop f4. And surprise, surprise, if you do nothing, you may eventually run out of moves. And white is sort of getting in some kind of a zugzwang because you can't really move that knight. I take your pawn. Knight a5 check, knight c6. But then your knight is no longer on c4. Knight a7, king b3, king b5, king c6, knight d6, f6. And this is a special moment. Awonder gets the chance to trade off the pawns, because of course can't drop a piece. Here of course there's this fg I can promote. But takes, can't take because now I will take the knight. Knight c4, e5, knight a3, bishop c1, knight c4, king b6, knight c4. And now we kind of have to decide where we're going with our king. Obviously want to go up. King b4, e4, knight e3, and probably here already you wanted to go something like king b3. Ah no, king b3 I can take. Bishop g5 takes, and here had to go king b3 and start running the pawn. That would have been very close to winning. But he goes king c3. Knight d5 check, king d2, and Awonder goes for those pawns, thinking, okay, if I win all those pawns, I might win the game. But it's not going to be enough. King d4, king f3, king takes c4, and he took on g4. Thinking he's going to gobble them pawns, and it's going to be a win. Now, it's white to move, Saleh to move, and survive. This isn't winning. That is correct, Chess Steroid. So the big question is, what is needed for this game to end in a draw? Because all these endings, the key question is the color of the rook pawn. Sadly, or luckily, depending on whom you're rooting for, this bishop ain't the right color. So that's the big question. Where is your king marching to? Actually, you're not marching here. That's not the square you're marching to first. There's another square you may want to march to. Well, you first want to march to f1. But can you march there if you take here first? You can't, because takes, I'm blocking you first. So you bring your king first. Now you take, well, doesn't matter at that point. Now you bring the king, now you take, and the king gets to f1 and in a corner. You can't stop me from f1 to get to h1. You may take that square, but then I go here. And it doesn't matter if you take the pawn, this is the wrong corner, and the game ends in a draw. So, quite an instructive game. I do think Awonder blew his chances of winning it. But hope you guys enjoyed this small lecture, and hopefully we can learn some more from these two guys in the next lecture as well. Thank you for coming. Any questions? Yeah, it's strict.